Good morning. This is for the ESO, and we are going through the book of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I know we were doing presentations last week and we didn't have time to review chapter 2. So today I want to review chapter 2 and give you an opportunity to do the activities. I want you to place the answers of the activities in the comment section of this video. If you open up this video on YouTube, where the video is streaming, there's a box underneath the video. It's called the comments section. I want you to place the answers to the activities in the comment section. That's on page 15. And we have activities 3 and activities 4. Okay? Obviously, activities 4 are more text where you have to write. Okay, it's a writing exercise. Describe Mr. Hyde's appearance. That's a writing. You need to describe it. Okay. For example. Okay. Let's read the chapter together. If you have your book, follow along or read out loud. That's better. If you can read out loud with me. Then you actually learn more and you practice speaking as well. Chapter 2. Mr. Utterson meets Mr. Hyde. Mr. Utterson walked in silence for a few minutes. Then he asked, "Are you sure that he used a key to open the door?" "That's a strange question," said Mr. Enfield, surprised. "Yes, I know," Mr. Utterson continued, "but the fact is that I know the name Hyde. And I think I also know the name of the other man, the name on the check. But I don't want to tell you at the moment." "What I told you was true," said Mr. Enfield. "The man had a key, and he still got it. I saw him use it only a week ago." Mr. Utterson was silent. Finally, Mr. Enfield said, "It was wrong of me to tell you all this. Let's agree that we will never talk about it again." "I agree," said Mr. Utterson. Mr. Utterson was very worried when he got home that evening. After dinner, he went into his office and took an envelope from the drawer in his desk. Inside the envelope, there was a will. It was the will of Dr. Henry Jekyll, one of his clients and an old friend too. It was a very strange will. He read it once again. On Henry Jekyll's death, or in the case of his disappearance for more than 3 months, all his money and possessions will go to his friend Edward Hyde. Mr. Utterson didn't like the will, especially the part about the disappearance. He liked the will even less now that he knew something about Mr. Hyde. Mr. Utterson put the will back into the drawer and decided to visit an old friend, Dr. Lanyon. The doctor was also an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's. Mr. Utterson arrived at Dr. Lanyon's house, and the servant took him into the living room. The two men talked for a few minutes, and then Mr. Utterson asked, "Do you know anything about Henry Jekyll's friend, Mr. Hyde?" "I can't help you," said Dr. Lanyon. "Henry Jekyll and I don't visit each other very often now. When we do, we always argue about scientific questions. I don't know about any Mr. Hyde." That night, Mr. Utterson couldn't sleep. He thought about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for hours. He wanted to help Dr. Jekyll, but how? He decided to meet Mr. Hyde and began to watch the building with the old door. He went there at different times during the day and night. stood near the door and waited for Mr. Hyde. Finally, one night, a short, dark-haired man walked to the door. His coat and scarf hid most of his face. The man took a key from his pocket. "Excuse me," said Mr. Utterson. "Are you Mr. Hyde?" For a moment the man was frightened. Then he answered, "That's my name. Who are you?" "I'm Mr. Utterson, an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's," Mr. Utterson answered. "Dr. Jekyll's not at home," said Mr. Hyde. "That's fine," continued Utterson, surprised at Hyde's answer. "I wanted to meet you, not Dr. Jekyll." "What do you want?" Hyde asked. "I want to see your face," said Mr. Utterson. Mr. Hyde didn't move for a moment. Then he turned slowly to Mr. Utterson, and the two men looked at each other. "Thank you. Now I will know you if we meet again," said Mr. Utterson. "Yes, it's good that we have met, and you should have my address," Mr. Hyde added, and gave the name and number of another street in London. Mr. Utterson was very surprised. "Does Hyde know about Jekyll's will?" he thought. "Is he giving me his address so that I can contact him after Jekyll's death or disappearance?" "How did you recognize me?" Mr. Hyde suddenly asked. "Someone described you to me," Mr. Utterson answered. "Who?" asked Mr. Hyde. "We've got friends in common," answered Mr. Utterson. "Dr. Jekyll, for example." "You're lying! Dr. Jekyll never talked to you about me," Mr. Hyde shouted angrily. Then he opened the door and disappeared into the building. Alone in the street, Mr. Utterson thought about Mr. Hyde and agreed with Mr. Enfield's description of him. "He's got an evil look," Mr. Utterson thought. Mr. Utterson continued to Dr. Jekyll's house, just around the corner, on the other side of the courtyard. So that's the text, okay? We have some words, some phrases. "It was wrong of me," that's on page 10 and 11. "It was wrong of me." That means I feel bad about what I did, or I did something wrong. Another one was a will. A will is a paper that you write so that in the case of your death, people know what to do, for example, with your body, the funeral arrangements, your money, your investments, who it goes to, whether it goes to your children or your uncle, or your cousin, or your nephew and your niece. You know, where do your belongings go? If you have money or if you have property, well, you should have a will, so in case you die, legally, people know what to do with your belongings. Another phrase is once again. One more time. Once again. You read it one more time. You know, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Another one is argue. Argue would be discutir. Discuss in English doesn't mean argue. Argue is angry, giving different opinions angrily. Discuss is calmly talking about different options. No anger, okay? Argue would include angrily talking about an issue. You're lying is when you're not telling the truth, okay? It's accusing someone of being a liar, which means the same thing. You're lying. It's not to say something that is true. Okay, so so we have the different activities. You have the different names: Dr. Utterson, Dr. Lanyon, Dr. Enfield, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You know which one goes with each number. Who went to the bank with Mr. Hyde? Okay. Who is Mr. Utterson's client? Well, who is Mr. Utterson's client? Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Utterson's client. Okay, so that's your free one. Okay, and then obviously these are writing exercises. Okay, I want to see writings. I want to see a complete phrase for each question at least. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I hope you all are doing well. I miss you. I miss my classes with you, and hopefully we'll be back together soon once this problem is solved. Hope you're all staying safe. Hope you all feel good. Nobody has the coronavirus, and that we all return healthy back to school. Okay? Thank you. Bye.